every fear begins with a quiet question that slips into the mind unnoticed, a simple, "what if?" that slowly grows heavier with time. What if this fails? What if I am judged? What if I lose something I cannot replace? Fear does not arrive suddenly. It tightens its grip when we attach our inner peace to outcomes we cannot fully control. Success, approval, certainty, recognition, these become conditions for our calm. And the moment they feel uncertain, the heart begins to shake. Japanese philosophy looks at this problem with unusual clarity. It does not teach detachment as running away from life, but as standing firmly within it, without being enslaved by results. When the mind stops demanding a specific ending, it gains the freedom to act fully in the present moment. The samurai understood this truth deeply. They trained each day knowing that victory was never guaranteed. A sword could be sharp, the body strong, the strategy flawless, yet fate could still turn. Because of this, their focus was never obsessed with winning alone. What mattered was preparation, discipline, and sincerity in action. To cling desperately to victory was considered a weakness, because it distracted the warrior from what he could actually control. This mindset was not passive, it was precise. By releasing attachment to outcomes, the samurai became more effective, not less, because fear no longer clouded their movements. Miyamoto Musashi reflected this wisdom when he said, "Do not regret what you have done. Regret is born when the mind replays imagined alternatives, outcomes that never existed except in thought. It grows when we believe peace was hidden inside a different result. But when action is taken with full presence and honesty, regret loses its power. There is nothing to cling to, because the moment was lived completely." In practical life, this teaching asks for something very simple yet very difficult. Give your full effort to the action in front of you, whether it is speaking, creating, training, or deciding. Then release the demand that it must end in a specific way. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop bargaining with reality. When effort is sincere and attachment is loosened, fear begins to soften. The mind becomes steady, and courage appears naturally, not as force, but as clarity. From this state, action flows more cleanly, and whatever the result, you remain intact, grounded, and free. This freedom is subtle but powerful. It allows you to move forward without the weight of imagined futures pressing on your chest. Each step becomes lighter, each choice clearer. Fear may still whisper, but it no longer commands. In that quiet strength, true progress begins, steady and unforced within you. In Zen thought, emotions are not enemies to be defeated, but signals to be witnessed with calm attention. Fear, in this view, is not who you are, nor is it a command you must obey. It is something that arises, moves, and eventually passes through awareness. The problem begins when identity fuses with emotion. The moment you say, "I am afraid," fear tightens its grip. Zen instead invites a subtle shift. Fear is present. This small change creates space between the observer and the feeling, and in that space, freedom begins to return. Zen monks trained themselves to sit with discomfort without rushing to escape it. In long hours of stillness, pain in the legs, restlessness in the mind, and waves of fear would surface. They were taught not to label these sensations as problems, but as teachers. By allowing fear to speak without reacting, its true nature revealed itself. Most fears, when watched closely, dissolve on their own. They feed on resistance, but weaken under observation. This practice builds an inner steadiness that cannot be shaken by passing emotions. When you identify completely with fear, it controls your actions, narrows your thinking, and convinces you that retreat is the only safe option. But when you observe fear, it becomes information rather than authority. You begin to notice where it lives in the body, how it changes with breath, how it rises and falls like a wave. This awareness transforms fear from a threat into a messenger. It may be pointing to risk, growth, or an old memory, but it no longer dictates your response. In daily life, Zen detachment does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means staying present without being hijacked. When fear arises before a decision, a conversation, or a new beginning, the practice is simple but powerful. Pause. Breathe. Internally say, I notice fear. That single sentence restores choice. Instead of reacting automatically, you regain the ability to respond deliberately. Over time, this habit reshapes the mind. Fear still appears, but it no longer feels overwhelming. You learn that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. By watching rather than obeying, you reclaim authority over your actions. This is the quiet strength Zen points toward, a strength rooted not in suppression, but in awareness. From this place, courage is not forced. It emerges naturally, because you are no longer fighting yourself. You move forward carrying fear lightly, letting it pass, while your direction remains your own. With practice, this mindful distance becomes instinctive, shaping calmer decisions, steadier speech, and deeper trust in yourself. Fear still visits, but it no longer owns the room. Awareness does, quiet and unwavering, even during uncertainty and moments of pressure. The Japanese concept of mujo teaches that all things are in constant change, rising and falling without exception. Nothing stays fixed, and nothing belongs to us forever. Fear feels powerful only because the mind quietly assumes it will last. In the middle of anxiety, it seems endless, as if this feeling defines the future. Mujo gently corrects this illusion by reminding us that impermanence is the natural law of existence. Just as night gives way to morning, emotional states shift, soften, and disappear, even when they feel intense in the moment. In Japanese culture, this understanding is not treated as something depressing, but something deeply meaningful. Cherry blossoms are cherished precisely because they fall so quickly. Their beauty is heightened by their short life. If they bloomed forever, they would lose their magic. In the same way, difficult emotions derive their power from our belief that they will remain. When we remember that fear, embarrassment, and even failure are temporary, their grip begins to loosen. What feels heavy now will not feel the same tomorrow, or even in the next hour. Fear often magnifies itself by projecting permanence. The mind whispers that this mistake will define you, that this moment will never be forgotten, that recovery is impossible. Mujo cuts through this story. Failure fades. Embarrassment passes. Even deep loss changes shape with time. This does not deny pain, but it prevents pain from becoming an identity. You are not frozen in this feeling. You are moving through it, whether you realize it or not. Samurai and monks alike reflected on impermanence to sharpen their awareness of the present. Knowing that everything passes made each action more sincere. If this moment will not stay, then it deserves full presence, not resistance. When fear arises, it can be met with the same understanding. It is here now, but it is already changing. Even while it exists, it is not stable. It trembles, shifts, and eventually dissolves. A practical way to apply mujo is through gentle self-reminding. When fear feels overwhelming, quietly tell yourself, "This moment will not stay." These words do not push fear away. They place it in the larger flow of time. The body relaxes slightly. The breath deepens. Space opens where panic once felt solid. Over time, this perspective builds resilience. You stop overreacting to temporary states and stop making permanent decisions based on passing emotions. Life becomes less about controlling feelings and more about moving with them. Just like the falling cherry blossom, fear completes its brief appearance, and then lets go. When you understand this, you meet fear with patience instead of panic. You allow it to pass naturally, trusting the rhythm of change that governs everything, including you, your thoughts, and this very moment unfolding quietly within you now. Much fear is not about failure, but about being seen while failing by others. This subtle attachment to reputation quietly shapes decisions and limits courage. Japanese philosophy warns that when identity depends on approval, the spirit becomes fragile. In Hagakure Yamamoto Tsunetomo observed that concern for reputation is the true root of fear. The samurai understood that chasing applause weakened clarity and invited hesitation. They acted according to principle even when no one was watching or praising. A warrior who depends on recognition gives power to the crowd rather than to his own values. This dependence creates fear because judgment is unpredictable and constantly shifting. Today, the same pattern appears through social comparison, public opinion, and imagined criticism. Much anxiety comes from performing for an audience that may not even be real. The mind rehearses future embarrassment and mistakes long before they ever happen. Japanese wisdom challenges this habit by asking whose voice truly deserves authority. When actions are guided by principle rather than image, fear loses its leverage. Letting go of reputation does not mean acting carelessly or without honor. It means choosing integrity even if misunderstanding or criticism follows. This shift returns power inward where it belongs. Fear shrinks because the audience no longer controls your sense of worth. A practical reflection is to pause and ask whose approval you are afraid of losing. Often the answer reveals expectations that were never consciously chosen. By releasing them, you reclaim calm, focus, and authenticity. The samurai path reminds us that a steady spirit values truth over applause. When reputation fades as a concern, courage rises naturally. You move freely, guided by what is right rather than by who is watching. In that freedom, fear finds little ground to stand on. The heart steadies, the breath slows, and action becomes sincere. Letting go of imagined eyes allows you to meet challenges with quiet strength. From this place, decisions feel cleaner and regret loses its voice. You act not to be seen, but to be true. This honesty becomes its own shield against fear. When approval is released, the spirit stands upright, unafraid, and clear. No crowd can grant this stability because it is rooted within character itself. By choosing principle over praise, you return to your own center. Fear weakens as alignment strengthens moment by moment. This is the quiet confidence Japanese philosophy points toward. It does not seek attention, yet commands deep respect internally. When you live this way, reputation becomes irrelevant and peace remains. Fear dissolves because there is nothing left to protect. You stand simply as yourself, grounded, steady, and unashamed. From there, action flows without tension or masks. This is true freedom from fear within you. Zen honors Shoshin, the beginner's mind, a state of openness and curiosity that allows one to encounter life without the weight of expectation. Fear often grows when we demand perfection from ourselves, when every action is measured against an imagined standard of flawlessness. In contrast, the beginner approaches each task without attachment to expertise or mastery. They are free to explore, to make mistakes, and to learn through experience rather than through judgment. The child's natural approach to the world demonstrates this principle perfectly. They try, fail, adjust, and try again without the paralyzing pressure of appearing competent. Their freedom lies in detachment from outcome and performance, and this detachment is precisely what allows real growth to occur. A perfectionist freezes under the weight of imagined scrutiny, their mind caught between fear of failure and desire for approval. In this frozen state, action is stifled and learning stagnates. Zen teaches that to remain in the beginner's mind is to embrace the fluidity of life, to allow uncertainty to be a teacher rather than a threat. The samurai and Zen practitioners cultivated this mindset through practice, rituals, and disciplined attention to each moment, recognizing that mastery emerges naturally over time, but cannot be forced. When the mind is rigidly attached to performance, fear takes root, whispering that any misstep is catastrophic. By approaching challenges as a learner rather than a performer, the grip of fear begins to loosen. Curiosity replaces judgment. The desire to explore outweighs the dread of failing. Each small experiment, each attempt, becomes a lesson rather than a verdict on worth or ability. In practical life, this principle can be applied to any endeavor, whether work, art, relationships, or self-improvement. Instead of aiming to appear perfect, approach each task as an opportunity to observe, learn, and adapt. The beginner's mind transforms errors into guidance, setbacks into insight. Fear loses its intensity when the mind is engaged in inquiry rather than defense. Over time, this perspective cultivates resilience and confidence that are not fragile because they do not rely on approval or perfection. Life becomes less about proving yourself and more about experiencing fully, moment by moment. Action flows more naturally when curiosity leads, and fear becomes a subtle signal rather than a commanding force. This openness to learning allows the spirit to expand, to engage with challenges creatively and freely, and to find peace in the process rather than in imagined results. In this state, the mind is alive, alert, and fearless because it trusts in growth itself. Fear often grows larger in the imagination than it is in reality. The mind rehearses every possible disaster, spinning scenarios that may never occur. In Japanese philosophy, this tendency toward endless analysis is recognized as a trap. True understanding, clarity, and courage come from direct experience, from moving through the world rather than sitting in thought alone. Just as a sword becomes sharp through repeated use, not by imagining its edge, the mind becomes steady and fear diminishes through deliberate action. Hesitation allows anxiety to accumulate, while movement disrupts its power. Musashi, the great samurai, understood this deeply. He wrote that action clarifies the mind, that engagement with reality dissolves the distortions of fear. When the body moves decisively, the mind follows, and worry no longer dominates perception. The principle is simple: start. Even the smallest step forward has disproportionate power against fear. When you act, uncertainty begins to resolve, and energy that was trapped in anticipation is released into tangible results. In contrast, remaining still allows the mind to loop endlessly, exaggerating threats and creating paralysis. This is why preparation alone, while necessary, is insufficient without application. The samurai trained rigorously, yet the true test came when technique met circumstance. Practice sharpened skill, but action revealed character and courage. The same applies in everyday life. Challenges may seem overwhelming, but fear is always strongest in imagination. A single concrete step, no matter how small, collapses the anxiety built around what might happen. This does not mean reckless action, but deliberate movement aligned with intention. The key is immediacy. Procrastination feeds fear, while immediate engagement disrupts it. Begin with one motion, one decision, one effort, and notice how the tension eases. Momentum builds naturally from there, each action reinforcing confidence, each small victory quieting the inner critic. Over time, this habit rewires the mind to trust experience over speculation. Fear still arises, but it is met with movement rather than hesitation. Life becomes an ongoing dialogue with reality rather than a battle with imagined threats. By embracing the principle of action over rumination, the spirit strengthens, perception sharpens, and courage becomes a lived skill. Each forward step, however small, dissolves fear's illusion and anchors the mind in what is real, in what is controllable. This is the quiet, practical wisdom that Japanese philosophy offers. Courage is cultivated in motion, not in thought alone, and fear's power collapses the instant you choose to move. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction or punishment, but in Japanese philosophy, it is seen as a form of freedom, a structure that prevents fear and chaos from dictating action. The samurai trained daily not to punish themselves, but to cultivate steadiness of mind and body so that fear could not decide their actions. Repetition, ritual, and consistent practice allowed them to respond with clarity even under extreme pressure. Musashi emphasized that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain, reminding practitioners that mastery is flexible and personal, yet it demands commitment. Discipline creates a container for growth, a reliable framework in which the mind does not get lost in hesitation or indecision. By following established routines, the samurai freed themselves from the tyranny of fluctuating emotions. Habit replaces doubt, ritual replaces panic, and consistency becomes a silent shield against fear. In daily life, this principle is no less powerful. When fear arises before a difficult conversation, a performance, or an important decision, the structures you have built, your habits, your rituals, your commitments, carry you through. They provide momentum when the mind wants to freeze and guidance when anxiety clouds judgment. Discipline, in this sense, is not rigid, but liberating. It is a way to move predictably and steadily, even when uncertainty looms. Practical application begins with small daily actions. Waking at a set time, dedicating moments to focused work, exercising, meditating, or simply following a personal routine with consistency. Even when fear resists, continuing the practice strengthens resilience. Each completed ritual is a quiet victory, proof that external circumstances and inner doubt do not dictate your choices. Over time, these daily commitments compound into confidence, clarity, and a sense of internal authority. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. Fear still appears, but it meets a mind trained to act, a body accustomed to discipline, and a spirit rooted in principle. Ritual and habit do not eliminate fear, but they diminish its power by providing structure. In moments of crisis, you are no longer making decisions from panic, but from a practiced steadiness. Discipline anchors the self, transforms uncertainty into manageable steps, and fosters courage that is reliable rather than fleeting. In essence, the samurai taught that freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the mastery of them. And through disciplined practice, fear becomes a visitor rather than a ruler. Steady action, repeated daily, becomes the foundation upon which courage is built, allowing the mind and body to move confidently forward, no matter what arises. Samurai philosophy often emphasized the mental acceptance of death, not as a morbid fascination, but as a tool to remove fear's grip on action. By acknowledging the inevitability of loss, the warrior stripped fear of its leverage, freeing the mind to act with clarity and courage. Death, like other uncontrollable outcomes, was treated as a constant companion, neither sought after nor denied, simply recognized. This acceptance extends beyond life and death into every aspect of human experience. When one imagines the worst possible scenario and sees that it can be endured, the mind relaxes and hesitation begins to dissolve. Fear relies on uncertainty, and by confronting what is real and unavoidable, its power diminishes. Detachment in this context does not mean surrender or apathy. It means refusing to be ruled by outcomes or external events. The samurai's strength lay not in avoiding danger, but in understanding that danger did not dictate their internal state. They trained their hearts to meet adversity without panic, to engage fully without clinging to life or possessions. This mindset allows courage to flourish naturally, because the mind no longer calculates every risk with anxiety, but instead responds decisively and without distortion. In practical life, a similar approach can be applied to situations that provoke fear, whether professional, personal, or emotional. Pause and ask yourself, can I survive the worst realistic outcome? Most often, the answer is yes. Recognizing this transforms perspective. The scenario that once seemed insurmountable becomes manageable. The mind is no longer hijacked by imagined catastrophes, and action flows from a grounded sense of reality rather than panic. Acceptance also cultivates resilience. When challenges inevitably arise, having mentally rehearsed and accepted loss or difficulty allows a composed response. The body relaxes, the mind sharpens, and decisions are made from clarity rather than desperation. This does not eliminate caution. Prudence remains essential. It simply changes the relationship with fear, turning it into information rather than a controlling force. Over time, internalizing the impermanence of life and outcomes strengthens character, deepens patience, and nurtures a steady courage that is not dependent on comfort or certainty. By confronting the ultimate possibility, the samurai, and anyone who adopts this mindset, learns to act freely, to move boldly, and to engage with life fully, unafraid of its inevitable losses. Death and difficulty lose their tyranny, and the spirit stands firm. In this space, fear becomes a subtle advisor rather than a relentless commander, and courage becomes the natural response to reality, no matter how daunting. Fear thrives in imagined futures, in scenarios that have not yet arrived and may never exist. The mind builds mountains from shadows, rehearsing disasters and worst-case outcomes endlessly. Courage, by contrast, exists only in the present moment, in the reality that surrounds you here and now. Japanese mindfulness teaches that attention rooted in the immediate, on the breath, the posture, the current step, anchors the mind and prevents it from wandering into the storms of what if. The samurai trained their awareness meticulously, focusing on each motion, each movement of the sword, each shift in balance, without letting anxiety about victory or defeat interfere. This same principle applies to daily life. You do not need courage for tomorrow, for challenges that have not yet arrived, or for situations that might never happen. You need courage only for this step, this breath, this decision, this action. When the mind clings to future possibilities, fear grows unchecked, becoming a tyrant over thought and will. But by shrinking the scope of attention to the present, the mind finds clarity and fear begins to dissipate. Practical application of this principle is deceptively simple. Pause. Notice your breath. Feel the body in space. Attend fully to the action in front of you. Let the moment become small and manageable, rather than imagining an endless chain of consequences. Fear cannot survive in a compressed, present-focused frame. The breath becomes a tether, the step a foothold, the immediate sensation a guide. Repetition of this practice gradually reshapes the mind. The habit of focusing on one breath, one action, one decision trains attention away from speculation and toward reality. Anxiety begins to lose its dominance because it is no longer fed by imagined catastrophes. Courage emerges naturally as a byproduct of presence, a subtle strength that does not require heroics or dramatics. Every small action taken mindfully reinforces the capacity to act despite fear, proving to the mind that it can navigate challenges without collapse. Over time, mindfulness becomes instinctive, and fear shrinks before it even gains momentum. Life ceases to feel like a series of overwhelming threats, and instead becomes a sequence of manageable, present-centered tasks. This is the quiet power of Japanese mindfulness. By shrinking the moment, fear loses its leverage, and courage arises naturally in its place. Each breath, each action, each deliberate step anchors the spirit in now, allowing the mind to move freely, decisively, and without the tyranny of imagined futures. Presence becomes both shield and sword, and fear is met with calm awareness instead of panic. In Japanese philosophy, effort itself carries profound honor, independent of the outcome it produces. Victory may be celebrated, but it is the sincerity of action, the wholehearted commitment to the task at hand, that earns lasting respect. This perspective transforms the way fear is approached. Trying despite fear is not merely a test of courage. It is a demonstration of integrity. When the mind is fully engaged, when effort is given without clinging to results, fear loses much of its grip. Musashi exemplified this principle through a life dedicated to practice and action without attachment. He moved, struck, and studied with complete devotion, yet he did not obsess over outcomes. Success and failure were external events, transient and beyond complete control, while effort remained entirely within his power. This distinction is central. Results are fleeting and often influenced by forces outside our awareness, but effort is immediate and entirely ours to wield. In daily life, fear often appears when we equate worth with outcomes. We hesitate because we imagine failure will define us, or because the approval of others feels like the ultimate measure of value. Japanese philosophy shifts the focus inward. Measure success by sincerity of effort, not by applause, recognition, or tangible results. When this becomes habitual, the pressure to perform perfectly diminishes, and the mind finds steadiness even in challenging situations. This does not excuse laziness or half-hearted attempts. Rather, it elevates wholehearted engagement as the true standard of honor. Practical application is straightforward yet profound. Commit fully to the action in front of you, whether it is work, learning, or relationships, and release the demand that it must lead to a particular outcome. Fear may still arise, whispering that the stakes are too high or that failure will be unbearable, but it loses authority when the mind is anchored in effort. Over time, this approach cultivates resilience. Each sincere attempt, whether it yields visible success or not, reinforces confidence in your capacity to act with integrity. Courage becomes habitual because the standard is effort itself, not fluctuating circumstances. Life becomes less about chasing approval and more about living in alignment with personal values. Actions feel purer, decisions clearer, and even setbacks carry lessons rather than shame. In this space, fear is transformed from a controlling force into a subtle guide, signaling where attention and preparation are needed. Effort becomes both shield and compass, guiding the mind forward with dignity, presence, and unwavering sincerity. By valuing effort above all else, one moves through life fully, fear intact but powerless, and honor ever present in every deliberate choice and action. Fear never truly disappears. It simply transforms when the mind learns to shift its relationship with it. The grip of fear loosens as attachment fades, revealing clarity where once there was doubt. When the ego softens, the need to control, to predict, or to be recognized diminishes, and courage quietly arises in its place. Outcomes no longer hold the mind hostage. Action begins to flow naturally, unforced and present. The courage to try is not loud or dramatic. It does not seek applause or recognition. It is calm, steady, and unshakable. In this quiet resolve, fear remains, but it no longer commands. You feel it, acknowledge it, and move anyway. Let go of imagined failures, of expectations, of the need to prove yourself to anyone but your own heart. Take the step that fear once blocked. Step forward not because the path is guaranteed, but because acting sincerely is more important than clinging to certainty. True power lies not in avoidance or denial, but in embracing the moment fully, presence intact, fear acknowledged, courage living in the action itself. It is in this balance, mind clear, heart aligned, body moving, that fear transforms from a tyrant into a guide, subtle and instructive. Calm, steady, and deliberate, the soul moves with dignity. Let go, release control, trust yourself, and step forward. That is real strength. That is power.